All right, so we'll probably see what happens on this in the future. But the next thing we're going to talk about is state-sponsored tattletales. Now, just to let everyone know, early this morning, Jim, you sent me over this text with this article, and man, it got me going. Oh my gosh! Like I sat there and I'm like, I could probably talk like for hours about this because there's just so many offshoots to this. Let me read this article from the City Journal, and then we can discuss it a little bit more. So, there's a phenomenon is sweeping many Massachusetts public schools. The bias incident report. The inner ring Boston suburb of Newton, home of Jake Auchincloss, the congressman for the 4th District, hosts an online portal where a person can report any cases of hate speech, bias, or discrimination. Another wealthy suburban district, Axton Broxborough, lays out a protocol for the reporting and investigation of all incidents of bias, including prejudice, bigotry, microaggressions, and cultural appropriation. Now here we go. Like it's, we're just getting into this thing, and it already making my blood boil, because I think this what happens is I think there's a political party that what they really want to do is they really want to kill speech. They want to be able to control speech. They want to control what you say, because if they can control what you say, they control you. And they really want to tamp it down. And I think what they do is they constantly do things, and they constantly go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says there's no such thing as hate speech. And I will even prove that, because I went, like I said, I was getting all crazy when you sent this to me. I'm like, oh man. And what we're gonna do is I'm gonna go to the Wikipedia. Yes, I know it's Wikipedia, but and what we have is the hate speech in United States. And I'm gonna read. In a Supreme Court case on the issues of Metal v. Tam in 2017, the justices unanimously, now they don't do things unanimously as, a lot, right?
No.
Reaffirmed that there is effectively no hate speech exception to the free speech rights protected by the First Amendment, and that the U.S. government may not discriminate against speech on the basis of the speaker's viewpoint. But wait, we just we just read, right, that a portal where a person can report any cases of hate speech, bias, or discrimination. So I think what's happening is in the ongoing effort to shut people up, to divide us more, to have us sit by and be fearful of thinking, talking, having discussions, goofing around, being stupid kids. What they want to do is they want to scare everybody into just not talking. And then what they can do is they can control how you think. Because if they're going to sit there and say, you can't talk about this and you can't say this, then obviously people are going to start thinking a certain way.
Did you see that video this weekend where there was a BBC reporter that came to the Twitter headquarters and was
Yes.
talking to Elon Musk? I
Elon
highly
Musk, yep.
recommend everyone go find that video if they haven't seen it yet. But essentially, what happened was the BBC showed up to Twitter to run a story, and then Elon Musk caught wind of it, decided to sit down with the guy and do a cross examination. And pretty much the interviewer was saying that since Elon Musk has taken over, there's been more hate speech. And Elon Musk is like, where, give me an example. And the guy's like, oh, I don't really use Twitter that much. He's like, give me
Yeah.
one example. He couldn't give one example. But meanwhile, everyone throws around, hate speech as like, this new thing. And like you said, it's like there's either free speech or there's not free speech.
Yes.
There's no middle ground there.
I always tell people you want free speech. Free speech is awesome. You and I both served, and people used to ask me, how do you like people that burn flags? Now, particularly, I don't, but I would have the discussion with them. But I also fought for their right to do that. And I used to tell that to people, and like, you're crazy. I'm like, I'm not crazy. I fought for the right for people to have free speech. Free speech means sometimes I have to hear or see things that I don't like to hear or see. You know how that benefits us as a society? I tell to my kids all the time, like, you let people prove who they are. If they come out and start say things or do things and I don't like those, you know what? Now you avoid those people. And all this does is, if there is a lot of this hate speech out there, which I think a lot of this is everyone's in this culture that they're going to be offended. Everyone takes offense to everything. It's just going to make it horrible. And we really need to rein this in as parents. We need to go to our schools. We need to say, listen, do you have these stupid things in place, and get them the hell out of here? Because there's a more insidious thing that we'll get to that I think this is the real reason why the government wants to impose these things. We'll get to that in a minute. But let me read some more of this because it's just mind blowing. And I think when you and I were talking about this, you talked about some 1984. So let me read this and then read this article a little bit more, and then you can talk about it. All right. So creating a system of decentralized educational surveillance. These bias incident protocols essentially deputize all members of a school community with the responsibility of monitoring behavior and speech. Anyone aware of an alleged bias incident may report it. The target or perpetrator of this alleged bias could be a student, staff member, or faculty. Everything from off-color language to physical violence to, as Boston Public Schools puts it, imitating someone's cultural norm could count as an incident. Most of these protocols allow for anonymous reporting, and once a report gets filed, an investigation would begin, which could lead to disciplinary consequences for the alleged perpetrator as well as possible school-wide initiatives. Oh my! I just can't. I just. Maura Healey a couple of years ago came out with guidance on this, and I have the screen up now. It was in, I believe, 2017. She sent out a letter to everyone talking about how they're going to go about doing this. No, 2020, November 17th, 2020. So here is at the end of this thing, like how it's going to work, what you're going to do, all this other stuff. We'll send a link in the description. Here are some ways of combating this bias incidents or, bias. And I'm going to read verbatim. Student leadership. Schools should foster and support student leadership groups representing marginalized communities, e.g., Black Student Union, an Asian American Students Association, the Gay Straight Alliance, Gender Sexuality Alliance. Not only do student leadership groups support students and their allies to help build resilience, they increase acceptance and understanding among the school community and contribute to a positive school climate. Now, that's page 6 of a 7-page thing. Page 7 just has comments or questions. Let me go right to the top, though, right? Because right at the top, right, they talk about all the different things. And here we go. Harassment is a conduct that creates or contributes to the creation of an intimidating or hostile environment for a student because of their race, color, religion, national origin, sex, gender identity, or sexual orientation. So here's where I don't like it, and I hinted to this a little bit earlier, and here's where it's going, is they have to say that whole soup of gender, race, religion, color, all that other stuff, right? But when you get to the meat of it, the only things they care about is page 6. We're going to make marginalized groups, and those are the really only people that you can offend. You can't offend any other group. And that's the insidious part about this, is it's being used under the guise of being nice to stop bullying, to stop hate speech, which is no such thing. But what it really is it only works one way, and it always works against certain people.
Yeah, it's you were talking about before the 1984 reference, and they call it the junior spies in 1984. I just pulled up a quick chapter, a quick summary on SparkNotes just to give the shortened version. So I'm just going to read that little snippet real quick, just so you can get a taste. But yeah, it's pretty funny how much George Orwell was able to predict in the book 1984 and
2024.
Yeah, exactly. So here goes the summary. So Winston opens the door fearfully, assuming that the thought police have arrived to arrest him for writing in the diary. However, it was only Mrs. Parsons, a neighbor in his apartment building, needing help with the plumbing while her husband was away. In Mrs. Parsons' apartment, Winston is tormented by the fervent Parsons children who, being junior spies, accuse him of thought crime. The Junior Spies is an organization of children who monitor adults for disloyalty to the party and frequently succeed in catching them. Mrs. Parsons herself seems afraid of her zealous children. The children are very agitated because their mother won't let them go to a public hanging of some of the party's political enemies in the park that evening. Back in his apartment, Winston remembers a dream in which a man's voice, O'Brien's, he thinks, said to him, "We shall meet in the place where there is no darkness." Winston writes in his diary that his thought crime makes him a dead man. Then he hides the book.
Yeah, this is the thought. It's funny because now I'm reading another part from the mass.gov guidance of hate and bias incidents in schools. Check this out. Underlying causes and difficult conversations. In order to prevent, identify, and appropriately address hate, bias, and prejudice, the school community should engage with related issues such as role of the unconscious bias, the histories of marginalized groups, and the continuing impact of racism in our society. So, again, to me, what this is, and again, you have to always look, the government is never doing anything for your good. Like the government, if they came out and said, hey, be grown adults, kids are going to do things. We have to teach the kids the right way to do it. That's one thing. But if you're going to come out and you're going to start talking about unconscious bias, histories of marginalized groups, all this other stuff, all you do is you keep perpetuating this idea. And when you perpetuate this idea, it's really only one side that is the aggressor. It's really only one side that can be the good guy and one side that can be the bad guy. And it's indicative because, like I said, I went and did a bunch of research on this, and what I found is universities in Massachusetts have been doing this for a while, and they actually have a reporting system, and you can actually go to University of Massachusetts at Amherst, and every time there was a bias incident, they reported it. So let's read some on my screen. I have some, and for people listening on podcasts, there's some great ones in here. So on January 25th of 2022, there was a lewd drawing made in the snow. Right?
Wait, how does someone make a drawing in the snow? By the way,
must have. Listen, there's a couple of ways you can do that. On January 12th, there was an unfair treatment of a student reported in an academic department. Where there was a real good one. Check this out. Student reports violation of COVID-19 protocols and harassment for following protocols. I mean, this is what we're talking about. Those people weren't following COVID-19 protocols. I was yelling at them, hey, you're not following protocols. And they're like, probably like, shut up and why are you? And that's an offense. And we're teaching people to take everything as an offense, to not have conflict resolution, to not sit there and deal with people as people and individuals. We're telling them, hey, if you have a problem with someone else, instead of fixing your problems, go tell somebody. And we're starting earlier. Like we start in college, like, hey, we're going to start in college. But as always, they move these things out slowly, these plans they have slowly. So it started in college, and now it's going to go to high school and elementary school. And then what your kids are going to say is every time there's a conflict, every time someone says something that they don't like, is to tell someone else, and that other person is going to solve your problem for you. And where this leads to, as these kids get older, well, in school it's the teacher, in college the professor. When you're at work as an adult, it'll be your employer. And if your employer don't take care of it, where is it going to go next? It's going to go to the government, and the government's going to solve the problem. And the government's going to be the one that sits there and says, hey, you said things not nice, and now we're going to make you pay and punish you. And again, that goes, like I said earlier, my larger point to this is there's no such thing as hate speech. There's no, as much as people want to get into arguments about it, there isn't. There's things we don't like. Can we be adults? Can we start teaching our kids to be adults? Sticks and stones. Just be nice to people. If someone says something to you that you don't like, whatever. You have other people. You have other friends.
I saw this thing this weekend. Someone was playing the best of COVID, like all the things that happened during COVID, all the craziness that happened. And one of them, obviously, you have all the stuff going on in restaurants. You have to wear a mask standing up and not while sitting down. Bars have to close at a certain time. But one of
Yep.
them was the reporting system. So like you were supposed to spy on your neighbors and you were supposed to
Yes.
tell the government like, hey, if they're not wearing a mask or if they're out at a certain time, like you gotta tattletale to you gotta tell the government what's going on. If they have more than 25 people at their house, you have to report them to the government. Like that's where this is all going.
It is. And when that was happening, I will self-identify. I had people at my house self-identify. I didn't care. You can call on me because I'm not the bad person.
I remember one
You
time
you're
we
not.
were at a birthday party and there was probably like 30, 35 people over when the cap was still 25 and we were all outdoors. And then all of a sudden a helicopter starts coming overhead and
Run
everyone's like,
inside.
run,
Run
they're here,
inside.
run.
And again, like I think it's teaching virtue in victimhood. It's teaching virtue and I don't want to say not being a good citizen, right? That's not the way it is. I understand people have things they believe, but if you're gonna sit there and rely on the government to punish people that you don't like or aren't doing what you want them to do, that is not what the government's supposed to be used for, and that's where we're going. There's more on this. I was just going through while you were talking. A student yelled at for walking on campus. That was like legit. I was yelled at for walking on campus. I'm going to go tell somebody. A Zoom lecture disrupted by racist and sexist comments. Well, what were they? A student reports that their pronouns are not being updated on their class roster. Come on. Come on. And again, like if we think these rise to the level that it has to be brought up and someone has to solve these problems, my gosh, are we in such big trouble as a country? Because our politicians want it to go this way. They want people to come to them and say, listen, let us solve your problems. Because if we solve your problems, we're going to have all the power to tell everyone to do what the hell to do. Right? Kind of like this. I'm a parent. I've had this happen before. Your kids are fighting, the kids are arguing, they're like, and you say, they're like, Dad. And I go, listen, figure it out. Because if I figure it out, neither of you are gonna like it. And that's what we're doing. We're absolving our responsibility, or well, not me. I would never do this, but we're teaching kids to say, listen, don't take the responsibility to figure out your problems. Have the government solve your problems. And the government's like, yes, let me solve your problems because I'm going to take over all your lives and tell you everything to do.
You
That,
brought up a great point earlier too about how they introduced this. So, like you said, it's like it starts off at the college level, and let's be honest, at the college level, most people are in the 18 to 25 year range. So you're talking about really young kids that don't really have, they're still, their minds are still very young in terms of like pushing back on things. When a school introduces a policy, they're probably like, yeah, this sounds like a good idea. It'd be a lot different than if you were implementing it in the workplace environment where people are more willing to push back. So they started at the college level. Then, like you said, it's like then they push it down to the high school level and they use the college as an excuse. Oh, we do this at the college level, so we're going
yes.
to bring it down to the high school level now. And then the high school starts introducing parts of it, and then it starts going down to the elementary schools, and they say, oh, well, the high schools and the colleges are doing it, so we're going to do it at the elementary schools too. And then before you know it, you have these programs or this new culture, a new way of life that we're operating under, and it's just like that's how these institutions get used.
So the other thing too is I remember years ago, and again it was effective. I used to tell people all the time, this anti-bullying thing is just a way for the government to make people complacent and not be able to push or fight back. So when they want to enact policies and things on us that we don't know how to fight back or we don't want to fight back, right? And it came to be. Covfefe 19, because I don't know if we can get away with saying the thing, came about. And what happened? A bunch of people were told to do a bunch of things, and a lot of people, not enough people, fought back. If more people fought back and said, no, this isn't right. And the best thing about a lot of this stuff is they use the term coercion. Oh, like if you're being hateful or someone's trying to coerce you, we just got coerced by our government. A lot of people got coerced by their jobs, by the government. Kids were coerced in the school to wear things and do things they didn't want to do. But they're going to sit there and tell you, if anyone makes you do that, tell us and we'll make them stop. But when we tell you to do it, you have to listen. No. Oh my gosh, it just blows my mind. And again, we need as a people need to actually start realizing that these things that they're doing for the betterment or for our good aren't. It's for their good, and it's a long-term plan. And it probably 10 or 12 years. Every time your kid has an issue, they're gonna want the government to solve it. That's the goal.
Yeah, it's exactly right, and it's yeah. People will be like, oh well, the government never put a gun to your head and
Yes,
told you to do anything. Well, it's like, well, you threatened people's jobs, you like kicked them out of the certain cities in America. Like you couldn't if you I don't want to go down a rabbit
yeah,
hole there, but yeah,
yeah,
it's like the government pretty much tried to take away all your rights if you weren't in compliance with what they were pushing on you. And
sure.
the more we get into the future, the worse it's going to get too. Because this stuff, not only is it just starting, but then with technology, I mean, we talk about driverless cars. You know, all of a sudden they can shut your car off. We talk about digital currencies. All of a sudden, we don't like your political views. We're going to shut down your banking. So this is just getting started, and it has the potential to get
Well, it
much.
has the potential, and the biggest thing we discuss all the time is people have to push back, people have to get involved, and people have to realize that the days of doing nothing are over. We have to do something. And again, whatever your ability is, do what you can, but doing nothing isn't an option anymore. And one other thing too, I'm reading this. Belmont school system has their whole incident reporting forms and how it works and all this other stuff. So they have like a question and answer fact section, and it says, "What is a protected group or protected class?" Massachusetts law outlaws treating people unfairly based on the person's membership in a protected class, such as your race, national origin, religion, disability, age, sexual orientation, or gender identity. And Massachusetts student anti-discrimination states no person shall be excluded from or discriminated against in admission to a public school of any town or in obtaining the advantages, privileges, and courses of study of such public school on account of race, color, sex, gender identity, religion, national origin, or sexual orientation. However, if we go back to page 6 of the Attorney General's memo, what does she do? She outlines 3 things that you want to push above these other ones. And this is, again, this is the other thing that I never understand why people don't get it. If everyone's equal, then that student leadership where you're going to have a black student union, Asian American students associations, gay straight alliance for gender, and all this other stuff. You know what else you should have? It should have said, hey, you can have a religious one. You can have a man and female one. Like you should have all these. But that's not the point. The point isn't to be equal. The point is to say, hey, listen, these are the ones that we really want to help. These are the ones we really want to take care of. And everyone else, screw you.
All students are equal, but some students are more equal than
Yeah.
others. George
Animal
Orwell,
Farm.
right there again.
Animal Farm. And it's just a bad road we're going on. I think in the future you and I are going to discuss about homeschooling and school alternatives. And the push, there's a lot of people starting to see this, and there's people that can afford it, and they've already taken their kids out and they put them in private schools, or they're homeschooling them. You see states starting to have school choice, and it's because stuff like this. I think most common sense people look at this and like, this is absolutely crazy. But the problem is there is a lot of people who are poor and don't have the resources or the ability to get their kids out of these school systems, and they're becoming, unfortunately, indoctrination camps. And again, and people are like, oh, that's too much. No, it's not too much. When you're sitting here telling me that if my kid goes to school and is joking with a friend, and someone over here sees him joking and doesn't like what he says, he can report him, unbeknownst to my son, right? And then my son can get in trouble, or my kids can get in trouble because two kids were joking and someone else didn't like it. Instead of the person going over there and be like, hey, listen, I don't like that you said it to him, and they could be like, well, this is the reason why. We're not teaching that anymore. Where's that being taught?
And like you mentioned earlier, we still don't know what is hate speech. Like you said, it doesn't exist. There's free speech and there's not free speech. So who gets to define what hate speech is?
Well,
And this goes back
that's
to Elon Musk interview too, where he's like, what the guy was saying that he was saying something sexist or something. He's like, so you're telling me that Twitter should ban everything on the platform that's slightly sexist? Is that what
yeah.
you're saying? That we should censor everything that's slightly sexist? The guy's like, oh no, I'm not saying that. Well, he's like, then what are you saying? Because that's exactly where this is going. Is like, there's no defined there's no definition here. It's
Well,
either it's a big gray area.
I have a definition, and it's the Supreme Court definition that I agree with. There's no such thing as hate speech.
Right,
There's speech you hate, right?
right,
There's definitely speech I hate. And listen, I'm sure people don't like some things I've said, and vice versa. It just happens, right? There's difference of opinions. There's difference of cultures. There's difference of religious beliefs where people have just differences. And what adults do is we don't absolve our responsibility to the government to solve problems for us. We take it upon ourselves to do one of two things, or maybe a couple things. We either have the discussions, which is like why I want this show, so we can have people on eventually that disagree with us, and we can have these discussions, or we ignore it, or we do something to make the narrative change or whatever, or to say, hey, to our kids, like that's not what you should do, or make learn from it. But to every time you feel offended or someone says something you don't like, to start telling kids to tattletale, oh my gosh, it's gonna be a special kind of hell of a place to live if we don't stop this. I'm sorry to say, man, I don't get it.
Next time someone comments, next time someone makes fun of my hairline, I'm gonna report them for hate speech.
Yeah, what if they call you bald and you're like, hey, listen,
That's an attack.
what can I do? I don't think that's a protected class. I'm looking again. Disability. Can I be a disability? My hair
Yeah,
don't grow.
the other thing I used to make fun of too is like left-handed versus right hand too. It's like, all of a sudden, it's like, I mean, this is where we're going. It's like you're just like like you're just making up things. It's like all the left-handed people are going to stand up. Like, can we have a left-handed group? You have all these other groups.
Yeah, and to me the other thing is this is from the usually from the party of inclusion. Everything's about inclusion, but if you deviate, they're definitely not inclusive. And I think they're trying to force inclusion by shutting down dissent or differing views, and I don't mind differing views, right? Like I thought we used to be the melting pot. Everyone brings something, and we get better. And again, I truly believe that. That's why I love free speech. I used to have discussions with you and other people, and I said the best thing about free speech is this: is it should be a battlefield of ideas. And I think I've seen some other people say this probably a lot more eloquently than I'm about to, but what happens is you believe what you believe, I believe what I believe, and on a battlefield of ideas, we present those beliefs. And then it's a point counterpoint. And then what happens is someone's going to win or someone's going to lose. Like someone's going to win the argument and debate, someone's going to lose. If I lose, it's incumbent upon me to say, man, I never thought about what that person brought up. And I go back and I think about it and I'm like, well, is there validity to that point or is I just not prepared? And you sit there and you go through it and you think about it. And then if you have that debate again, you say, hey, wait, I thought of something else and this. And if they can't have a comeback, they should go about thinking. And then what happens is hopefully eventually after going back and forth and having these hard and tough discussions, what you'll see is you'll see that us as a society hopefully gets better. Hopefully what we can sit there and do is say, hey, we've had these discussions, we've had the debates, we've talked about this issue, we've talked about this, we brought all these points in, and this is the best way forward for society. What politicians do by getting in the way and saying like this person doesn't have to answer to it, all that's doing is allowing for that discussion to fail and our society to never get better. And that's what these people don't understand. We're not getting better as a society. I know a lot of people a little bit older than me. I'm probably an old guy now and younger than me. And most people agree society isn't getting better, it's getting worse. And it's getting worse with the more of the stupidity we're doing. Like we're regressing, and we shouldn't be regressing. We should be progressing, but we're not progressing because when you're trying to take that step forward and you're trying to have that intellectual discussion, people shut down. I don't know how many videos I watch on different topics, and they'll talk to people and they'll ask a question, the person will respond, and then they'll ask the next logical question. It's the next logical question. And the people shut it down because they don't want to answer, because they know they lost with the next logical question, because they never had to think about it. Because anytime anything ever came in their mind that challenged that, they didn't have to think about it. And now what they're going to do is they're going to tell on you, and your teacher, professor, employer, or eventually your government is going to come after you. And that's not where we need to go.
That battlefield of ideas that you brought up is so important to have, and that's exactly what is trying to be shut down right now. Whereas, like the way that you fight misinformation is with truth. What they're
Yes.
trying to do is they're trying to fight misinformation. They're saying, oh, the solution to misinformation is censorship.
Yes.
And that's not the right approach, because a lot of times they're classifying the truth as misinformation and they're censoring it. So the only way that you can find the real truth is through the battlefield of ideas, and it's a dangerous slope that we're heading down when that's being shut out of the picture.
Definitely. So let's keep an eye on this. I think, people out there maybe start putting some FOIA requests in, or going to your school's websites to see if they start having these bias incident reporting tools or anything about it, and have the discussions, because this is supposedly from DESE, this is supposedly from the state, but I'll tell you what, we elect school committees to do a job, and hopefully they do a job. You were elected to represent us. It's not supposed to be from the state down or everything. So, we're gonna have to push back and fight. Another thing we're gonna have to fight.